We are live. Hello, I'm Thomas Frank Carr, Nate Bauer, Blue White Illustrated. It's a big moment for Penn State football. Thank you for joining BWI live here on YouTube. Dani Dennis-Sutton has committed to Penn State football. James Franklin and a contingent of Nittany Lions are in Indianapolis, so it's a big day for Penn State football. Nate Bauer, senior editor of Blue White Illustrated, has joined me here on the channel. Nate, how you doing tonight? And what do you think about everything happening all on the same day?
I can't keep it all straight. It's it has been quite a busy day, but here we are, and obviously the commitment of Denny-Sutton is caps it all, right? I mean, it's the cherry on top of a day filled with news and information for Penn State football.
So let's get into it. Let's get into the commitment. Dani Dennis-Sutton, tell us about him.
So he is a 5-star, right? I mean, and that's the thing that everybody is looking at, and that's the thing that everybody is interested in. I mean, the separation between those 5 stars and the high 4s, is obviously a matter of opinion, but you've got all of these analysts, you've got all these people who see him and say this is a guy who meets that level. He is ranked number 11 nationally at Rivals.com. That's out of every single one of his class of 2022 prospects. He is the number 1 defensive end in the class, and he checks in at 6'5", 253. So you're the scout and the expert on this kind of stuff, but in terms of measurables and the things that he has shown on film and at camps, he lives up to the status.
Yeah, he is, and he's big. We'll get into it a little bit later about some of the things that he brings to the table. But one of the quotes in an article that is live now at Blue White Illustrated, BWI.rivals.com, from his head coach, talked about his journey as a football player and kind of where he started and where he ended. But a 5-star commitment for Penn State football, Dani Dennis-Sutton. Nate, when it comes to the impact of 5-star players, what is the impact that it actually has on a program? Because this is a big moment. Penn State fans are super excited. This hasn't happened in a while for Penn State football.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all about perception, right? And it goes so much farther or further, I should say, than just recruiting, right? I mean, it's funny because Pat Fitzgerald at Northwestern said it today, but he said success begets success. And so that's on the field, but it's also in how you're perceived nationally. And the reality is Georgia wins these battles on that national scale more often than not. Not necessarily, I'm just saying with Penn State, but when you look at the top of the Rivals rankings and the guys that are national prospects, you're going to see a lot of SEC teams. So to have Penn State in there with the number 11 commitment or the number 11 ranked prospect in the class, that can do a lot, the same way that it did with Michael Parsons a few years ago. That it's the same kind of impact in terms of not only what it can do for the program once the player actually gets there and starts to perform, but also just on the recruiting trail, how you're perceived, how people take you in, how recruits and their families receive you.
Yeah, and I think it's a big moment for John Scott Jr. and shout out to Deion Barnes, the assistant at that position as well, because let me just run down the class so far, what they have at the defensive line with Tyrese Fearbury, a 4-star out of Pittsburgh. Ken Talley, a 4-star out of Pennsylvania. So right off the bat, for Penn State fans to dominate the state thing, they've got the best pass rushers, for the most part, from Philadelphia and from Pittsburgh. Then they get Zane Durant, a 4-star out of Florida. Caleb Artis, a 4-star defensive tackle, 6'4", 290 pounds as a junior out of New York City. And now Dani Dennis-Sutton, a 5-star defensive end. So that rounds out a 5-man defensive line class. They are defensive line heavy. They've got the beef up front. And it's a big class. So we'll get into a little bit of issue there was. It's not that he just opted out of football. McDonough High School in Maryland opted out because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So a lot of the stuff that we're looking at is all from his sophomore season. So as much as he is a 5-star and he is all of those things, it's a crazy place we find ourselves, Nate, where your 5-star recruit doesn't actually play football in 2020. And there's it's just the way it goes, right? With Penn State and with the pandemic, the way that things have gone is like even your 5-star recruit didn't play football last year, but that should tell you how good Dani Dennis-Sutton is as a player, that he just spent like the offseason training, and at 6'5", 253, he is a 5-star recruit. I also think that this is a class, if you look at it as a whole. So we're going to get into a little bit more of Dani Dennis-Sutton as a individual, but the class itself, this to me signifies a big step forward in recruiting for the Penn State football new coaches that they've amassed over the last 2 years, from Phil Troutwine to Taylor Stubblefield, and now John Scott Jr. coming in with a big recruiting class here.
Yeah, no, I mean, no question. And these are guys that when James Franklin hired them, that was the expectation, was that they could, have that level of impact. I mean, obviously, when you go from, my man, Coach Chaos with the Wild Dogs, he had his own thing, right? I mean, quite literally, he's got a brand, for the Wild Dog stuff. But when you go from that, you're never really sure exactly what you're going to get next. And I think that what you've seen with some of the recruiting battles that Penn State has had, over the 12, 18 months that John Scott has been at Penn State, he's come out on top. He's had success in those recruiting arenas. And, this is just another signifier for Penn State that the process of assistant coaches moving on and growing to do bigger and better things isn't necessarily the dagger to the program that it might seem to be at first glance.
Yeah, and well, it goes back to talent evaluation, and James Franklin, I think, has proven for the most part over the years, his talent evaluation extends beyond just players towards coaches, and being able to identify good recruiters and good coaches. And I think that this is a step towards guys that can do both. And we've seen the fruits of that labor. 9 commitments in the month of July alone, including 1 for the class of 2023. And we'll go through a little bit of the recruiting journey for Dani Dennis-Sutton. We mentioned Micah Parsons a little bit earlier, the highest recruit that Penn State's had in the last several years. He was 6th overall in the class of 2018. Dani Dennis-Sutton comes in at 11, but it was not the roller coaster that Micah Parsons was. That one had like movie level drama in the stuff that went on with Micah Parsons. What do you remember of that story? Because it was one that took over, and even if you didn't follow recruiting, you knew about what was going on with Micah Parsons.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to speak out of turn, but something about being on the game day set at an Ohio State game, he was committed to Penn State and then not committed to Penn State, and Ohio State was the destination, and then it wasn't anymore. And ultimately he came back around and made that commitment in his ceremony to Penn State on signing day. So it was pretty wild, and the videos and all of those things. Micah Parsons has a flair for the dramatic anyway.
Yes, he
I think
does.
that anybody who's been around him can attest to that. But yeah, I mean, this is a very, very different set of circumstances to have this happen in the middle/end of July, right? I mean, you've established that relationship, you've locked it down, and that's not to say that it can't open back up or that there's, recruiting in college football is always a running out the clock situation. You got to get the signature on the paper, but to have it happen now, certainly it signifies, his level of commitment to Penn State, him saying in the announcement ceremony that he wants it to be over with, right? I mean, these are all things that should have Penn State feeling very, very confident as it goes into the rest of the summer.
And that's one thing that I picked up on. And again, Ryan Snyder does great job reporting for us on the recruiting trail. And a couple of things I picked up on from Dani Dennis-Sutton is that obviously Penn State was the early favorite in his recruitment, and Georgia did come on strong. And there was some time there where it was about a 50-50 battle, according to Ryan and the reports he was getting in his conversations with Dani. But they weathered the storm. And with Dani's personality and everything that I've gotten the vibe from him, this feels like this is a commitment that's going to stick, because he seems like, Ryan said one time, he's not recruited by the other guys. Like, he's his own man. He makes his own decisions. He's a really mature player and a really mature young man. And again, that comes through on the film quite a bit. So I do think that this is one that a 5-star at the end of July that is going to stick for Penn State. And it's a big moment for them. And some other news and some other tidbits about Dani Dennis-Sutton: honor roll student, really mature guy that is a very driven individual. Some of the quotes about his coach are about how coachable he is, how passionate he is, and how hard he works to be a good football player. And that alone, with his talent, Nate, is a huge bonus, because we both know when it comes to football players, you can be as talented as you want, and if you don't work at it, eventually there's a ceiling, because somebody as talented as you is going to work harder.
And I mean, especially with a guy like this, who, just talking earlier about him not playing last season, a lot of this isn't about who and what he is at this exact moment, right? It's about who he's going to become and the type of player that he will be. So, what I'm interested in is learning from you. How does he fit at Penn State? Like, where does he fit? What type of player can he be? What is the potential that this kid has when he gets to Penn State?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Nate, because right now live we have T. Frank's Film Room over at our YouTube channel. If you're looking here, just open it up in a browser and hit pause at the start of the video. We'll finish up here, then you can watch T. Frank's Film Room. It's a full breakdown of his film from his sophomore season. So we go into the caveats of everything about Dani Dennis-Sutton and his unique journey through the COVID-19 pandemic to be the 11th overall player. But just some things I can tell you right now.
How about a hint? Just fill us in a little bit.
He is a strong side defensive end. He is a powerful player who uses long arms and a healthy dose of violence to be a good football player. And some of the things that is hand usage, as you can see in a clip like this, where he wins football games with technical abilities at the position. So he's not a guy that is just winning off of being 6'5" and 250. As his coach said, and as you can see on film, he's worked at it, and the development of learning how to play football has made him into sort of an unstoppable force at times. Now, there's some areas he needs to work on. I think if you watch enough football, you can see as a tall guy, he stands up pretty quickly. He also plays a lot of on the inside at McDonough High School, where he played football, where he plays football right now. So there's some technique things that he can improve upon. But when you look as this is a starting point from 2 years ago, and this is his film, that is a really impressive highlight reel right there. That's just one of the areas we cover in T. Frank's Film Room. And it's something that I think if you're a Penn State fan, that combination of physical abilities, strength and length, and then the way he uses his hands, I don't think it's a like-for-like comparison, but everyone wants a player comp. Yetur Gross-Matos, I think, was a little more fluid of an athlete, but their similar strength and hand usage and arm length to disengage and not win just with pure speed. I think that's a fair comparison. He's a stronger, believe it or not, he's a stronger, thicker version of Yetur, because Yetur didn't turn into what Dani is right now until like his junior year in college. Dani was 6'5", 250 as a freshman. I'm not exaggerating. He's a big boy, and he's always been a big boy. He didn't grow into his frame. I think he just came out that size, honestly, from what I've looked at.
I was going to ask you, did you happen to note that he looks like a giant in that film?
Yes. So here's the thing. This is the thing that I don't understand about perception is I've seen guys that are 6'6", in high school, and they don't look big. So Tyrese Fearbury is another guy in this class. He's 6'5", roughly the same frame with longer arms, and he doesn't look as comically big as Dani Dennis-Sutton does. And I've seen guys, again, comparing in this class, 6'4", 290. Caleb Artis does look a little comically large. So there's a fair comparison. But Zane Durant is 260. And he doesn't look as big as this guy does, as Dani Dennis-Sutton does. So you've got an amazing ball of clay to work with that's already being shaped early by his coaches in high school. So I think that that's a huge advantage. And I'm excited to see his senior year, what we've missed in the last year of his development. Because if he's as hard of a worker as he shows on film and his coach says, and again, you can check out what Greg Pickle found out and what Ryan Snyder's insights are. Those are all over bwi.rivals.com. Exclusive stuff on recruiting. Sign up, get a subscription, because we're going to be doing more of this stuff live on YouTube, but also more coverage of Penn State football and Penn State sports. bwi.rivals.com/subscribe. One area that I think is an interesting place that we can go next is how Penn State has won in this recruiting class, because it's not just that it's Dani Dennis-Sutton who chose Penn State over Georgia. That's the first one we're talking about today, but Penn State has had a good number of wins on the recruiting trail in sort of 50-50 places. And another one that I know Penn State fans probably feel good about because of the classic rivalry is Nick Singleton. So Nick Singleton was a pretty close battle between Notre Dame and Penn State. The Governor Mifflin 4-star running back, another high 4-star running back, another high character guy, by the way, another hard worker. So Penn State is building a really mature class with a lot of upside. Not just that, but you've got a couple of guys from Florida. Penn State went into Florida and got the guy that I mentioned earlier, Zane Durant, 4-star defensive tackle, who I really like. I really like this guy, Nate. And again, if you want to see T. Frank's film room, Thomas Frank Carr, I have a film room of him over on our YouTube channel. And then another guy who's really fun, another running back that was a close toss-up, not just with Florida and Florida State were in on the IMG running back, but Katron Allen, another guy that Penn State was able to win in a close recruiting battle. And they always, you know how it's always never one player, Nate? It's never one game. It's always the culmination of everything. This class has been in a culmination of wins. For the morale side, how much does that do for not just Penn State football fans, but for the Penn State football staff?
No question. And especially coming off of last year, right? I mean, that was
right.
That was a look. Nobody would debate or argue that last year was anything other than a disaster for Penn State football. I mean, 2020, the COVID, Micah Parsons opted. I don't want to run through the whole list, but it was just obviously a litany of issues that confronted the program. And then it got to December and also missed on some of the guys in the recruiting class that it very much prioritized and wanted to get. So, right. There was a little bit of an aura of you never want to turn it into, oh, does he still have it? Does James Franklin still have the magic touch? Well,
right.
I think that one of the points that he made and one of the things that stood out, obviously one of the big conversations last year was about how Penn State didn't get all of its commits in Pennsylvania, right? It did not have the success in the state that James Franklin had laid out from the onset of his arrival at Penn State as being notably a major priority.
5-star offensive tackle and a Penn State legacy, Nolan Rucci, in another close battle that they lost last year. He went to Wisconsin instead of coming to Penn State. So this year, when they get a 5-star, they're able to land him. What did he say? Because you did an exclusive interview with him, and he talked about some things that they've tried to augment going forward that might have helped them with some of these guys that from Florida we talked about with Zane Durant and Katron Allen, the ability to communicate with guys that they didn't have before. And from what it sounds like, he wants to take forward, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly there was a Zoom, right? I mean, first and foremost, that's the thing that he's mentioned the most is just, it's not just being able to FaceTime, right? Like they have been doing that and have had the ability to do that for years, but there are things that you can do on Zoom that you can't do on FaceTime, including making presentations, sharing your screen, right? It's all very intuitive and things that not only have they dipped their toes in, but they've gone 2 feet in, They have
Right.
they have gone the whole way in being able to give compelling presentations, making compelling recruiting pitches over Zoom with these guys. And that is a massively powerful tool to have. James has talked about how in the past, you really had to hope for players to take unofficial visits on their own dime to Penn State to really have any shot with them, to make it even worth your effort to recruit these guys. That's not the case anymore, right? You can have a kid from California and show him what Penn State looks like, show him the Penn State football program, show him the plans that you have for him in his career at Penn State. It's not just California. There are other places that are not easily accessible, or it's not easily accessible for them to get to Penn State. So to have that and to make those initial impressions by using technology is a very, very powerful tool that obviously they're using right now, but I would anticipate they're going to continue to use. And then one addendum that I would make is James Franklin also got his mojo back, right? Like as COVID has waned, as some of the restrictions have lifted, as some semblance of normalcy has started to return, you can see what James Franklin, has been able to do, the gusto, however you want to call it. I mean, honestly, mojo is the right word in a lot of ways. And so for him to have that back, for him to be able to have those relationships and make that impact with these guys, you can see how it's being effective right now.
So I wanted to pull this up because you're right. You can see the mojo right here, Nate. So this is where Penn State stands as of Dani Dennis-Sutton committing to the class of 2022. They are now second behind only Ohio State. You can see the biggest difference, obviously, is the 4 stars and the 5 stars. They're tied with the quality of 4 stars in their class, but Ohio State with 4 5 stars in their class to Penn State's 1. And another point that I think is really important, because if you look at where Penn State was before in the average star rating, and we'll filter by that, they've jumped significantly ahead of some other places like Miami, who was ahead of them before. Obviously, Miami has only 5 players in their class, but Penn State now in the top 10 of their average star ranking, being a close to a 4-star, a high 3-star. So this is, not just because they have a large number of commitments at the moment. They have more than anybody else here in the top 10, but they do have a high average star ranking. And this is above where they've been over the last couple of years. And this is, I believe this is higher than what it was, or it's close to where it was in 2018. And this is what makes championship runs. This, like, when you can consistently be in the top 5, and this is where Penn State was trending in the past, and then they hit a couple down years. This is how you are a competitive team year in and year out in college football, getting these 5 stars, getting those guys that, as James Franklin said, we're not elite yet, but we're close. They're back to climbing that hill, and this is a big moment for Penn State football, because Dani Dennis-Sutton, as we, will refresh here, brings them to 2nd overall in this class with a really strong 4-star contingency, and then 2 of these 3 stars are below her. One of them is a guard from Lackawanna Community College. Another is a safety from Lackawanna Community College. And another is a kicker. So JB Nelson, if you want to see T. Frank's film room, he's a very, very talented player. So that might be a little bit of an under ranking just because of the circumstances. But 2021 should be fun. Penn State's heading in with perceived momentum, and the 2021 Penn State football preview, a 116-page full-color magazine, comprehensive guide to the Nittany Lions' upcoming season, packed with exclusive interviews, features, opinions, and analysis from somebody like Nate Bauer or Ryan Snyder, Greg Pickle, Dave Eckert. They do a great job. The magazine is out right now. To learn how to get one, bluewhiteonline.com. How excited are you? Football season's around the corner.
Extraordinarily excited, and that's coming after a year that was awful, right? Like last year's football in every sense, and it's not to diminish what was going on in the world around us, but it was just a shell of the experience. And I think that this as much as I do. Being at games, being in that environment, there's something electric to it that it's just different. And driving
and having
up
that
to
electricity, just having it watching football, right? Yeah.
Correct. I mean, driving up to Beaver Stadium last year for the Ohio State game, and it taking 5 minutes from my house to the stadium. It was cool for 5 minutes, and then it was really, really depressing. And so the fact that we're back, the fact that it's happening, it's just super cool for guys like us, and certainly you would assume for everybody that's watching this.
We'll be live here for a couple more minutes, so if you have any questions, especially with some of our regulars over on the Lions Den board at Blue White Illustrated, BWI.rivals.com, that's how you get exclusive content, by the way. That's how you subscribe to Rivals, you're a message board user, and then you get some stuff like you can ask us on the live show, or you can get the insider information so that you knew the temperature of the room coming into this week. So if you have any questions, post them now. We'll be live for a couple more minutes. One thing that I wanted to say, Nate, is that as much fun as this has been, the class of 2022 is finally winding down. That is their 21st commitment. So they have 4 slots, and there's some wiggle room there as far as how that goes. But you're going to run out of room here eventually. So if you want to see Ryan Snyder's top remaining players available article, again, bwi.rivals.com, he gives you the best case scenario ranked 10 to 1 to know who is available and who they want for those final couple spots. Spoiler alert, number 1 just committed. So you want to see the rest of that list. But for you, neither of us are the recruiting insider. So but to see the class is filled already, how much does that tell you that they're ready to get back and reset the clock to normal so they can start working on 23 and have that finally be on a normal cycle?
Totally. And that's the whole deal, right? Is 2023 being able to get these guys. James Franklin talks about it all the time, about it being a marriage when you make your verbal commitment that you're not going to go on other recruiting visits, you're not going to go on official visits. That's a big deal. The expectation of the staff with these guys and the guys with the staff is that's it. They're committed. They're in this relationship, and it allows Penn State at that point to move forward. And that's the way, very obviously, that Penn State wants to operate. James Franklin constantly wants to be a step ahead. And so when you have this class banked, I did not know that it would be this full this quickly. And one of the anecdotes that demonstrates that is, over the July 4th weekend, Penn State's, you were talking about the average star per player number a couple of minutes ago.
Yeah. Penn
State was like 29th in the country at that time. They have just gone, it has been a remarkable month of July for Penn State recruiting. And so for them to be able to have done this, it really sets them up to kind of turn their focus and turn their attention completely to the season that's coming up, honestly, 2 weeks.
You scared me for a second. No, you're right. You are right. I want to go over one final thing here before we get out, because we're going to look forward with the class of 2022. Again, Dani Dennis-Sutton, he is committed to the Penn State Nittany Lions, 5-star recruit, the #1 defensive end in the nation. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. He's Nate Bauer. We are BWI Live, taking you through Dani Dennis-Sutton's commitment and its impact on the Penn State recruiting class, Penn State perception nationally as a recruiting power, and of course the on-field implications of a guy who's 6'5", 250 and plays like he's angry about that. I want to go to one final thing, because now we just talked about only a couple spots left, and we're going to check out the class as it is by position. So if you check over here, receiver, 3 receivers. You got tight end Jerry Cross, who, by the way, has been committed. You talk about big people, 6'6", he's probably 255 at this point. He's a huge person. But this is kind of the breakdown of the class so far. 2 running backs, 2 quarterbacks, 3 offensive linemen. If you were to add another player into this class, knowing the depth chart like you do and kind of look into the future, what is the position that you would add with one of those final remaining spots?
I think maybe the most pressing in the minds of fans would probably be attached directly to what happens with Lonnie White at receiver, right?
Right.
However he decides to go, and obviously roster management is so much different now with the transfer portal. It really changes things where if Lonnie White doesn't end up coming to Penn State will still have options, whether it's at the high school level or through the transfer portal. But yeah, I mean, depending on what happens with him, certainly I think that would be an area to build that group out by one more.
And that's an area where Penn State is strong with a couple of receivers already going into the final month before the start of training camp and then into training camp. A couple of guys set to make their announcements in the near future. One of the interesting things about this class is, to me, I'm looking at either linebacker or safety, because right now Penn State, they've got Keon Wiley, who is going to be a transition player to the linebacker position. So that's going to take a little bit of time. I think if they had a guy who's on an earlier track, that would probably be helpful. And then another player in the secondary, because Mekhi Flowers, I think they see him more as a safety. He sees himself, based on what I've seen in the film room, he sees himself as a receiver. So depending on how that falls, they might have that fourth receiver on the roster, or they might be looking at a safety. But another corner or a linebacker, to me, are really to round out this class where they need to have a little bit more on the secondary. Because if you look at the flexibility, and we'll go back to Dani Dennis-Sutton here for a second. If you look at the flexibility of what they have up front, Caleb Artis can play the 3 technique at 290 pounds, or if they need him to, kind of like PJ Mustipher, who's flipped and flopped back and forth between nose and 3 technique, I think he's got the body type to do either. Ken Talley is a super underrated player. Like, I know we're here talking about Dani Dennis-Sutton, but I'm a huge Ken Talley fan. I think he's going to be a balanced speed rusher with enough to stop the run. I always get too excited. You can get too excited about the guys you like, but I think that's a versatility piece that's super underrated. Zane Durant could develop into a pure 3 technique, or he can be a hybrid guy to play on the edge and be another strong side defensive lineman like Dani Dennis-Sutton. And Tyrese Fearbury has a huge upside and could turn into another speed chase all-around player. So they've got the flexibility of body types to play 5 different players along the line and to mix and match those talents. One final thing that I think is important to remember is that this is how, again, I mentioned it earlier, this is how you find talent. Because if you look at the hit rate in classes, it's for a 25-man class, it's about 8 to 10 players that are regular contributors for you on the football field. And if you look at the average star ranking and the number of those guys that then go on to bigger and better things, either at the NFL or become all pros at positions like that, they usually come out of classes like this. So Penn State is in a great spot to add a ton of talent in 2021, 22, and obviously going forward. Nate, any final thoughts about where we stand right now on the BWI live show and heading into the season?
I need a nap. I need dinner. It's been a wild day and a wild month, and for as slow as last year was, this is great. I mean, this is what we live for, and it's been very, very exciting, and we'll get ready for preseason camp.
Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on with me today, Nate. That's Nate Bauer. He is the senior editor at Blue White Illustrated. I'm Thomas Frank Carr, your host here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel for breaking news like Dani Dennis-Sutton committing, a 5-star athlete, or whoever is going to be there for those final 4 spots in the Penn State recruiting class. All of those things we've got you covered on the YouTube channel, the BWI Daily, and of course, Blue White Illustrated, bwi.rivals.com/subscribe. Thanks for tuning in.
Do it.
We'll do this again soon.